Place as politicians, clerics, actors and an astronaut join global reaction to news of his death.
He poured different aspects of art into the presentation of his music. He was the absolute sort of definitive fusion of pop music, fashion and art.
We'll be looking back at the life of a man who changed the course of contemporary music. Also this lunchtime, the partner of former EastEnders star Sian Blake, found dead with her two young sons, is set to appear before court in Ghana. Anglican church leaders from around the world gather, trying to avoid a split over the issue of homosexuality. Princess Cristina, the sister of the King of Spain, has appeared in court on charges of tax fraud.
And coming up in the sport on BBC News, could track and field world records be erased? That's the call from UK athletics, who want to clean up the sport.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. It's one of those do you remember where you were when you heard the news moments. The announcement this morning of the death of David Bowie has brought tributes from around the world, from people from all walks of life. The star died at his home in New York after an 18-month battle with cancer. He was 69 and released what would be his last album on Friday, his birthday. It wasn't just Bowie's music, though that on its own brought iconic status, but also the personas he created, which broke boundaries, the unconventional, striking visual images that challenge perceptions of music, fashion and gender. Born in London, David Bowie went on to carve out a career that changed the path of contemporary music. David Silito now looks back at his life.
Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go.
Where do you start? The songs, the ever-changing appearance, the blurred sexuality, the mystique. If you want to understand the look and feel of the 70s, David Bowie is as good a place to begin as any. And now he's gone. A single message from his son Duncan. Very sorry and sad to say it's true. I'll be offline for a while. Love to all. He died, it said, peacefully, surrounded by family, after an 18-month battle with cancer.
Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do.
What was it that made Bowie so special? This is the moment in 1973 when he killed off Ziggy Stardust, a pop character. There were gasps, despair. It wasn't just the music. He was like an alien who had arrived to rewrite the rules of what you could do, how you could look. A few months later, he reappeared with an entirely different look and sound.
I felt really comfortable going on stage as somebody else, and it seemed a rational decision to keep on doing that, and so I got quite besotted with the idea of just creating character after character.
Time is waiting in the wind.
Soul music, Jacques Brel, Anthony Newley. He was a musical jackdaw. He'd studied mime, hung out with Iggy Pop and Lou Reed, and at one point he changed his entire sound in the middle of a tour.
If you take this assignment, you'll have complete authority.
And in The Man Who Fell to Earth, he played an alien struggling to relate to the world he was in. It was alarmingly close to real life. He was falling apart. Drugs were taking over.
You can be heroes just for one day.
He had to escape. He went to Berlin and with Brian Eno created music that the critics adored. But this was about much more than just the music.
It was an extraordinary fusion of absolutely brilliant music. You know, you can't forget what a fabulous lyricist he was, what an interesting lyricist, you know. The way that he poured different aspects of art into the presentation of his music. He was the absolute sort of definitive fusion of pop music, fashion and art.
What came next was the era of video. Again, Bowie was ahead of the pack. And this was the peak of his chart success. His new, clean-cut, MTV-friendly style made money, but didn't make him happy.
Artistically and aesthetically, it was probably my lowest point.
If he was worried he'd become too mainstream, the noise created by his Tin Machine project solved that problem. In the 90s, he embraced a new invention, the internet. But his appearances in public gradually became rarer and rarer. Then, unexpectedly, a final burst of creativity. An older, frailer Bowie, but still recognisably the man who always wanted to move forward. That restless desire to change. His echoes are all around us in the landscape of pop culture. Influential is almost an understatement when it comes to David Bowie.
Well, in the hours since news of David Bowie's death emerged, there's been a stream of tributes from those who worked with him or those who simply loved his work. From prime ministers and archbishops to actors and even an astronaut in space. Tony Visconti, who worked closely with him, said this: "He always did what he wanted to do, and he wanted to do it his way. And he wanted to do it the best way. His death was no different from his life," he said, "a work of art." Nick Hyam now with more reaction to Bowie's death.
Starman by David Bowie, an artist who always had just a touch of the unearthly about him. Among the tributes on Twitter, Britain's current starman, astronaut Tim Peake, who said Bowie's music was an inspiration to many. Madonna said she was devastated, describing Bowie as a great artist who changed her life. Actor Ricky Gervais wrote, "I just lost a hero, R.I.P. David Bowie." Rocker Billy Idol said he was nearly brought to tears by news of Bowie's passing, and Prime Minister David Cameron said he grew up listening to Bowie, a master of reinvention who kept getting it right.
Today we're mourning the loss of an immense British talent. I mean, genius is an overused word, but I think musically, creatively, artistically, David Bowie was a genius.
Even the Archbishop of Canterbury was a fan.
I remember sitting listening to his songs endlessly in the 70s particularly, and always really relishing what he was, what he did, the impact he had.
Every person when they're young thinks they're the freak, they're the outsider, they are the other. And Bowie, by presenting these various personae who were the freak, the other, the outsider, gave them something to relate to in a way that pop stars who offer wonderful songbooks do not. And so it's personal, and people are grieving personally.
David Bowie's death made headlines around the world.
David Bowie, Musiker, Maler, kreativer Künstler mit jeder Faser.
В кругу семьи скончался легендарный музыкант Дэвид Боуи.
Good morning, America, and breaking news. Legendary rock star David Bowie passing away overnight.
They were laying flowers this morning in front of a mural of the singer in his birthplace, Brixton in South London.
Very shocked, you know, he doesn't seem quite old enough to go, and there's totally unawareness of his illness, wasn't there? So, yeah, it's very, very sad.
The death of an icon is a huge thing socially, and I think we're going to see a lot of reactions.
It's just days since Bowie's latest album was released. On it, this song about dying. It's called Lazarus.
Look up here, I'm in heaven. I've got scars that can't be seen. I've got drama, can't be stolen. Everybody knows me now.
I've got nothing left to lose, he sang, treating death as yet another performance. Lazarus rose from the dead, David Bowie won't. But his reputation will live on. Nick Hyam, BBC News.
Well, ABC correspondent Mallory Hoff is outside David Bowie's apartment building in New York, and that the city where he felt most at home.
Simon, New Yorkers certainly have very special places in their hearts for David Bowie. They say they often enjoyed simply seeing him around the Soho area. This is where he lived with his wife, supermodel Iman, for a number of years. This is actually the building. You can see outside here a number of flowers and candles, people coming by to pay their respects. This is certainly a makeshift memorial that is expected to grow throughout the day. Now, David Bowie had co-written an off-Broadway show that was in performance currently. The last show expected to play on January 20th. We've also learned that Carnegie Hall was planning to honor David Bowie in March. Still unclear exactly how that performance will take place. But again, out here in Soho this morning, quite the scene. A lot of people walking by, waking up to this news, learning about the death of an icon, a legend, David Bowie. A lot of New Yorkers feel gone too soon. Simon, back to you.
Mary, thank you very much for that. Well, our arts editor, Will Gompertz, is here. Of course, the music was huge, but he was more than that in a way. This is a cultural loss.
Oh, extraordinary. I mean, David Bowie was an artist in its truest sense. In a way, he was the Picasso of pop, Simon. He took the art form, which was quite macho, rock and roll, early 70s, and he transformed it into something completely different, something nuanced and far, far, far more different. It was... He sort of dealt with androgyny, with alienation. He was, in a way, an existential artist. He was taking on subjects and themes which simply weren't even thought about in the pop music world beforehand, which was very straightforward. And he suddenly found that there's millions of people in bedrooms across the world, often in suburbia, who he connected with, who had the same feeling of being a misfit, not fitting into the world that it was presented to them, but believing in a different world. And he presented that world to millions of people, and they inhabited it with him. And in that way, he is extraordinary. And then, of course, he just changed and changed and changed and changed, decade after decade, sometimes successfully, sometimes less successfully. But it didn't matter to him. What mattered to him was saying that what he had to say that he thought was important and putting it out there. And if people were with him, they were with him. And if they were against him, they were against him.
Well, briefly, I was going to say, whilst there was a generation, you and I may be part of it, which related to it, there was a generation very uncomfortable with what he represented.
Yeah, having some bloke pitch up on television looking like a woman was an anathema to people like my parents. But, you know, too bad, the world had moved on. He was a punctuation point, and he connected with millions of people, as I said, around the world. And the thing about Bowie, I was just thinking about it this morning, what was it that made him touch us so deeply? And I think it was he just had an honesty about him. So although he was an extraordinary character and an extraordinary artist, there was also something incredibly ordinary about him. He was the boy from South London. You know, he was the man who fell to earth, and he kept his feet fairly firmly on the earth. When other people were taking taxis and first-class jets, David Bowie would just be on the underground, put on a pair of dark glasses, read a Greek newspaper. Nobody bothered him.
Well, thank you very much, Will Gompertz. Thank you. Well, there will be a special programme on the life and music of David Bowie. It's on BBC One tonight. That's David Bowie, Sound and Vision, presented by Jeremy Vine at 7:30. It's coming up to 1:15. Our top story of this lunchtime. David Bowie, the iconic British musician, has died at the age of 69 in New York.